Hi everyone, Leanne here from Jaded Blossom, and it's time for another challenge at our blog. This one's all about flowers. So quickly, I went ahead and I used the Fancy Heart dies, the background one, and I cut my own stencil. So I'm using a piece of acetate. I cut the heart shape out of that acetate, and I'm making my own stencil with it. So super easy peasy. I used my Gemini machine to do that, ran it through a couple times. I actually had to use metal shim. That actually is from, that piece of acetate is actually a cover from an old Cricut mat. And now I'm trying to line up the heart on my A2 size card base. So that is an A2, well, it's not really an A2 size card base. It's an A2 square card base. So 4.25 by 4.25. So I cut it 4.25 by 8.5 and cut it and scored it at 4.25. So I have a 4.25 inch square card. So I'm trying to line up my heart, and I'm using that little acetate piece of graph paper that I got from Simon Says Stamp. And I'm just trying to line up my homemade stencil with the center of the card. So it's a little tricky. I'm farting around here trying to get it lined up for you. So it's kind of neat. You can use Jaded Blossom stencils or not stencils, Jaded Blossom dies to cut your own stencils. It's very easy. And if it's got a solid outline, like this one does, you're in business. So now I'm going to do some ink blending, and I'm using Distress Oxide inks. I've got my Wendy Make Art station that I've got it magneted down to, and I'm using my Tailored Expressions blending brushes. And I'm going to blend spun sugar on the top, and then I'll add picked raspberry to the center, and then dusty concord to the bottom. And I'll just go back and forth trying to get a smooth blend. But you know that Distress Oxide ink is really easy to blend. It blends like butter, so super handy. Using the Tailored Expressions blending brushes, like I said. Yeah, so this is like a very easy card, I think. It's like a no-brainer. So you're quickly just making a quick background. I actually started out thinking that I was going to leave this on a white card base, but I changed my mind later, and you'll see that. I thought I'd just, leave that all in. You might as well. You can see where I'm going with this whole thing. But there we go. And I'm loving that Make Art station for holding the stencils. Jaded Blossom has a bunch of stencils you can use with your own cutouts, with masking stencils. It works really well. Super easy, I think, and super fun. So there we go. So I thought I'd do another Valentine's card because this is pre-Valentine's Day. Jaded Blossom challenges are always the first Sunday of every month. And yeah, so it gives you a lot of inspiration from the design team members. And there we go. Isn't that, I just love that. And it does dry back a bit, being Distress Oxide ink. Now I'm using the Random Heart stencil from Jaded Blossom. I'm going to apply that on top of the ink blended portion, and I'll be adding my stencil back on, my homemade one, or masking stencil. I'll add the masking stencil, and then I'll add that first, and then I'll put the random hearts on top of it, and I'll be doing some ink blending over top. Now this is going to be subtle because I blended the background very solidly. Now, if you, in the past, I've done like a light blend and then applied the stencil on top, and it stands out a little bit more, but I just wanted it to be very subtle, so you can see some texture there, but not really, So just for something a little bit, not so run-of-the-mill. And not sure if I mentioned it, but I use paper tray ink white cardstock for the card base. It's kind of my favorite card base material, and I like that it's so super white. It's like white, not creamy white. So if you're going for that, that's great. I've Recollections cardstock actually from Michaels is actually a really good weight, but the problem is that I find that it's not super white. It's almost like a gray white. Anyway, so there we are. So I've got my craft tacky glue from Simon Says Stamp, and I've cut some flower dies, and I've used the poinsettia dies, the little flourishes, and I cut those all out of white cardstock from paper tray ink. And I'm going to just apply them in a grouping to the side of this heart. And yeah, I used my Gemini machine to cut all these out again, like I always do. And I'm just going to be adding, like I said, a little floral grouping to the lower right-hand side of my card. And I'll add a little bit of dimension with some Stampin' Up! Dimensionals. on certain ones. And you'll see that here. I'll add a little bit of dimension in the center of certain flowers. I don't necessarily pop up the whole thing because I kind of want it to, have some movement, and it looks kind of nice loose. Do you know what I mean? Like it'll kind of pop up and look a little more organic is what I'm going for. There we go. So I'm just going to add my last flower, or one of my flowers here, sorry, on top of that nice ferny piece. I like that. Now these flourishes from the poinsettia dies, they are my favorite when I'm doing little floral designs. They just look so pretty added into your little bouquet. So I like that. So there we go. Easy peasy stuff. Like I've always say in my design videos, not rocket science. I try not to do anything too hard. This is supposed to be fun after all, right? We're all supposed to be having lots of fun. And my favorite cards to make actually have mostly dies because I love die cutting. I love my Gemini machine for die cutting. And I love Jaded Blossom's dies for doing it. So lots of fun. I like all the stitching and the pretty details. They really do think of everything with their dies. So quite handy. So there we are. I'm adding 3 little floral pieces. They look like little pom-poms. I think they're actually meant to be flower centers, but I use them as little mini flowers. And for me, I always find that you get the best look when you go with odd numbers. So I have 5 flowers on this card front and 3 flourishes, and 1 little piece of greenery. I just like the look of that the best. I also have the little centers for the little flowers cut out, and I'll be adding those also, which are, just adds a little bit more texture, especially with all the stitching and all that. So that little holder for my glue, I don't know if I'm sure I've mentioned in the past, but in case you don't know, I think it's by Make It by Marco. They make these neat little holders for your glue, and it really does work awesome. I love it. And they've got an Etsy shop. Like I said, Make It by Marco. So there we are. So now I'm doing my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm going to stamp a sentiment from Love You Lots. And this is risky. It's risky doing freehand stamping on a card you've already done, but I decided I would do it, and I would show you that it can be done. You don't have to have a MISTI, although I recommend getting one, but you can do it freehand. Just make sure you stamp it a few times off to the side. Make sure you're getting good ink coverage. But there we go. So now I'm going to add some Nouveau Crystal drops in white, simply white, which is kind of my thing. And I kind of sprinkle them around, in the centers of the flowers and little dots around. They add a little bit of texture without adding busyness because they're the same color as the background. So that's kind of what I'm going for there. It just, adds a little something. And I needed to add the flowers because, like I said, that's part of the challenge. So if you're going to participate in the challenge, you got to link up your project over at the Jaded Blossom blog before next month's first Sunday, because the first Sunday of every month is a challenge. So you've got to link up your project the Saturday, the first Saturday of every month by midnight, and then we will see who the winner is, and you'll win a stamp set of your choice. And then we will go ahead and start our new challenge the Sunday right afterwards. So there we go. So I'd love to see what you come up with. So make sure you go and play along. You just have to have a flower on your project somewhere and some Jaded Blossom products of some sort on there. And you can participate in our challenge. It's always fun. There we go. So now I'm just making sure I have enough little dots on my card. And at this point, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm not loving it. There's something missing. There's something wrong. Now looking at it as I do this voiceover, it doesn't bother me as much, but it was bugging me. So I'm going to be taking these little photo corners dies from the Mini Tag Dies 3 set. And I'm going to add one in the lower right-hand corner. Those are my EK6X tweezers, just so I can get things straight. I'm going to add one in my upper left-hand corner. It just seemed empty, but I didn't want to round the corners. I was having trouble with this card, to be honest. And like I said, looking back at it, it looks fine. But at the time, I was just, I don't know, something was bugging me about it. I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong. It was like I needed to bring in more color somehow, but I didn't want to, I'm trying to decide, do I want to round that corner there? What do I want to do? Now, I did like it. Now that I look at it, hindsight's 2020. I probably should have walked away, but I do like how it turned out in the end. So there we are. I'm just trying to figure it out. Am I going to round those corners? Geez. This is what I do all the time. I fuss and fart. You don't always see it on the video, but I left this in so you could see me humming and hawing, trying to decide what to do with this design. So I'm thinking, I'm going to round those other two corners. And I think about it, and I don't. It's like, no, I better not. I'm trying to decide, what does it look like? Should I do it? No. And I'm glad I don't. So I end up, in the long run, I use a piece of 4.5 inches by 9-inch piece of cardstock from Paper Tray ink that's called Plum Pudding. It sort of matches the Distress Oxide ink, that Dusty Concord. And I decided that I would cut that. I cut my little square white card in half, and I'm just going to apply that to the front of my card base and have that little bit of a border of purples to sort of draw the eye around. And there we go. So this is a 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch card. So I'm going to have to use a larger envelope. Can't use my A2 size envelope. But I don't know. I preferred it with a bit of an edge, like a colored edge. So now I've got that leftover piece of white, and I don't want to waste it. I'm going to put it on the inside where you will do your writing to the recipient. And I just think it turned out well in the long run. But anyways, thank you so much for stopping by. Maybe leave me a comment. Did you like it before or after I added the purple? But hindsight's 2020, right? So we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.